Randy Meeks, a staple in the Scream franchise for essentially creating an entirely new character archetype for slashers, the horror fan. Randy is a standout character in the first Scream because of his hilarious and relatable performance. He's basically you, the audience member, freaking out because he's trapped in a situation he knows far too well from his favorite movies. His paranoia is hilarious in scenes like this.
There's a formula to it, a very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
But it's also familiar in a way that felt so unobtainable in past 80s slasher flicks. What makes a Randy tick? And were they successful in replacing him in the latest sequels? Well, let's get into it.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Starting with the first movie, Randy Meeks is introduced to us during the infamous fountain scene. Immediately, he corrects Tatum on her movie logic and pokes fun at the town's recent tragedy, as most high schoolers tend to do.
Did you really put her liver in the mailbox?
Randy really shines in the back half of the first film when he starts losing his mind at the video store because he doesn't have the mystery figured out. This scene represents everything I love about the Randy character. He's following the situation closer than Deputy Dewey. He knows his horror movies, i.e. video store clerk, and his character is delightfully paranoid about the situation. This is meta, relatable, and silly as It's a blast watching Jamie Kennedy embody this character. I think it's perfect that they cast a comedian in this role as well because he's inarguably the comic relief, but most importantly, he had to be relatable to work. In nearly every facet of Scream, there's some sort of relatability. It knows its audience is familiar with the tropes of slasher flicks, and that's where a lot of the humor is generated. You can't have a Scream film without it. It's embedded in the DNA of this franchise, and the Randy character is one of the best proponents of it. The horror movie rules that Randy spills to the drunken crowd are iconic, but also have those three characteristics heavily built into them in the writing and performance. Randy is having a good time here, beer in hand and being the center of attention, but he's also very paranoid in his delivery. He's an inexperienced teenager that breaks his own rules, but he's aware of them just like us. He's sort of the definition of, we're all thinking it, but I said it, except this isn't your drunk uncle around Christmas time spouting off some weird political conspiracies. This is Randy Meeks, His appearances in Scream 2 and Scream 3 are equally as fun, but they also show a different side to Randy. He's a little more confident in the beginning of Scream 2, correcting his fellow film bros on horror movie quotes.
I believe the line is stay away from her, you bitch.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Wait a minute, he's completely wrong here, but that works so well with the audience surrogate thing. I don't think Randy's rules not necessarily applying to every film that he's in, or his logic being faulty here, is a hindrance to the character. It's more of an addition. It makes it seem more lifelike because it's what the audience is saying during this scene. We expect this certain thing to happen, but then the film itself will subvert our expectations. Scream 2 Randy is cocky, and that, in my opinion, leads to his poetic death. We get a taste of old-fashioned Randy paranoia when he talks with Dewey in a later scene, but for the most part, Randy has changed big time for Scream 2. His death even epitomizes this, as he breaks every rule in the book. He separates from the group and everyone else in the surrounding area. He uses Gail's phone and still walks over to Gail's van, even though that would be option number 1 for where is Ghostface hiding, and then insults the previous killer, essentially digging his own grave and nailing the lid to the coffin. Although I think Randy would have had so much potential for a really cool character arc in Scream 3, I kinda don't mind this death. It's fitting because we saw a change in his character from the previous film. Had he remained static and paranoid, he might have survived the sequel while sacrificing his newfound confidence. Basically, what this boils down to is a cocky Randy is a dead Randy. Remember that. Since his little cameo appearance in Scream 3, the Randy has been replaced a few times. In Scream 4, it's arguably either Robbie, Charlie, or Kirby. Considering that one of those characters dies and another is the killer, I want to just focus on Kirby Reed for now. Kirby is introduced to us as a rebellious and cocky kid, driving well over the speed limit past Sheriff Dewey. What's excellent about the writing from Screams 4 to 6 is that they found a new path to take the Randy character down. When we meet Kirby, she is already at the same stage as Randy in Scream 2. She knows the rules and lets everyone around her know it, including Charlie and Robbie. Kirby gets attacked at the end of 4 by Charlie, but it's revealed in the next movie that she survived her stabbing. Her survival answers the question of what if Randy survived in Scream 2? As she explains to Tara in the 6th entry, she was so traumatized by her near-death experience, she became something that the monsters would fear. Through the trauma she experienced in Scream 4, her arrogance transformed into confidence. That's why I see her as a survivor. I like to think that if Randy survived Scream 2, somehow he would have followed a similar path. I'm not necessarily saying like he's gonna be a police officer in Scream 3, that might be a little bit weird, but it would have been a little more fitting if Randy and Sydney had gotten together in the end, in my opinion. Listen, I'm not one for romance, but that was set up from the beginning. And oh boy, would that fulfill so many fanfics. But that leaves us with one more character. Sort of. Mindy Meeks Martin. While it's arguable that Chad could fall into the Randy category, it's his twin sister that pretty much dominates the role in both Scream 2022 and Scream 6. Just like Kirby, Mindy is introduced to us as cocky and rude to her friends. She's a know-it-all that immediately starts pointing fingers and making guesses on who the killer is. One of the biggest issues I have with Mindy Meeks Martin is that she has two strong character traits that conflict each other. She's hardly paranoid about the situation she's in, yet she's constantly wrong on top of all of that. This is the exact opposite way to introduce a Randy character, in my opinion, that I would say even the character of Kirby Reed struggles with. Randy is exactly right to suspect Billy Loomis as the killer, but he lacks the self-confidence to speak up about it except whispering to Stu at the video store. At the same time, it seems like the writers are doing this on purpose. For example, here's the first conversation Mindy has with her partner Annika in Scream 6.
It doesn't bother you? I mean, being at a house party after you were almost brutally murdered?
No, I think of it like being struck by lightning. The odds of it happening twice to the same person are extremely low.
This whole scene shows that Mindy is unfazed by the events of the previous film, and to that I ask why? Does Mindy feel no empathy? Is she a sociopath? Does she even care that her and all of her friends almost died the year prior? I just can't buy into that. Not only does this dead end her Randy character arc, but it removes the humor of watching this horror nerd freak out about getting caught up in an all too familiar situation. Now, in all fairness, the writers do try to set up a different style of humor with her character. I just feel like it falls flat. This is mostly established at the end of Scream 6, but she's basically wrong about the killers twice. Kind of. Let's talk about that. In Scream 2022, Mindy doesn't seem to suspect our killers. She follows Amber into the previously unknown basement of Stu's house to ultimately protect her. Mindy probably saw her going into the basement and wanted to make sure she didn't get stabbed. During this conversation, the tension is high, but it's ultimately played for laughs as the two joke about being the killer. Let's just say this conversation didn't age very well, but I don't think at any point Mindy actually suspected Richie or Amber, especially before Amber blasted Liv in the face. Still one of my favorite moments in franchise history. Then in Scream 6, Mindy accuses Ethan right after Quinn and Annika's deaths because his only alibi is that he had Econ. Now, although yes, she guesses one of the killers correctly here, she doesn't guess that it's the entire family of the main killer from the previous entry. We see her visibly frustrated with this at the end of the film. I'm just not crazy about this direction for the character because really all it serves is commentary on the mystery of these last two movies. Like, yeah, that was a facet to Randy's character in the original Scream, but he's also hilarious to watch even if you have no idea what's going on. Newcomers to the franchise might have been turned off by her performance because a lot of her jokes and references feel like inside jokes for hardcore Scream fans and no one else. On paper, it's funny to see the technical third Randy character be bad at her job, but only if you deeply analyze the 5 films prior to this one. For the younger generation that these films are targeted towards, some of these jokes might have flown over their heads. Randy and Kirby are superior in my opinion because their comedy is less niche. You could easily drop Randy and Kirby into another meta horror flick and they would still be entertaining. They don't rely on your knowledge of the franchise you're currently in, they rely on your overall horror knowledge to be relatable and funny. Mindy sort of misses that boat for me, but at the same time, she has some exceptional moments. Think about the conversation she has with Kirby in 6 at the Ghostface shrine. Like, that's pretty awesome. I may disagree with them on their take about the Candyman requel being the same quality as the original. Come on, I don't know about that, but still a good scene regardless. At the end of Scream 2022, Mindy gets stabbed and her twin brother barely survived. If this was a typical Randy model, Mindy would be on a similar journey as Kirby. She needed to find a way to be stronger than the monsters, but that trauma is seemingly tossed aside in Scream 6. Remember her introduction from earlier? With that, Mindy nearly follows the same arc in the requel sequel that she did in the first requel. Wow, that's a lot of equals. Anyways, she ends Scream 6 in the exact same spot she ended the previous film in, and remains a static character. It's not as interesting as Randy or Kirby's story because the trauma doesn't shift her character at all. It's not a tragic fate like Randy's, and it's not a heroic one either. It kind of just feels like dead weight at times, especially in the third act. If I'm being honest, it might just be better overall if Mindy wasn't trying to fit the Randy mold, but instead pave a new path for her own character. My favorite scenes with Mindy across the last 2 movies are when she's with Annika. Building that relationship and tearing it apart in the first half of Scream 6 is devastating to watch. The latter scene by itself is gruesome, but it has an emotional layer due due to the well-paced romance these two characters have. Mindy kisses Annika goodbye and then she dies violently. It's so tragic and incredibly well set up. Now humor me for a second because I think there's still time for course correction to make Mindy a great Randy character. Maybe after experiencing 2 super traumatic incidents, this sends Mindy into a recluse-like state of paranoia. At the beginning of 7, she's holed up at her mom's house drawing connections from the stab Reddit on who the next killer could be. This could play into the mystery and capture the same energy as Randy in the video store, but with a darker edge. What if after being wrong twice, she's spot on in the next entry, but no one wants to listen to her because she's seemingly gone mad? I think this could be a really fun arc for her to explore, and once again, another way to spin the Randy character in a brand new way. This would send her out of the static funk she's been in and back into the Randy model with purposeful direction. I don't know about you guys, but I would love to see a rules monologue come from a Mindy Meeks who's been holed up at her house for like a year, ripping her hair out and losing her mind. I think that there could be something really funny and darkly emotional about all that, but these are just my thoughts on the Mindy character. Randys aren't exclusive to Scream 2. I would go so far as to say that they're more than just a horror fan. Cabin in the Woods features a character like this in the form of a stoner, and instead of being a horror aficionado, he is in tune with the world around him. A very fitting character trait considering the conclusion of that film. Keeping that in mind, I think that the most important element to a Randy character is for them to be the audience surrogate. They have to confidently say what the audience is thinking at that moment, whether that's a correct guess or a total mislead. As long as the audience can relate to them and they aren't secretly a sociopath like Mindy Meeks seems to be, you can find a way to make it work. How do you guys feel about the Randy character archetype? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this big old nasty video talking about a random weird thing about the Scream franchise. I really like making videos like this, so I hope you like them too. I would like to make more in the future. Fingers crossed. You should subscribe to this page and support me on Patreon because, like, that's a pretty cool thing to do. The link for Patreon's in the description. You can be on my podcast. That'd be pretty cool. I don't know. It's down there if you want it though. Don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.